Hello.
Hello, everyone.
Welcome to the SpenceNuts and Quede podcast number 4.
I believe so, if we count the last one.
Oh yeah, the last one was a little weak, but it
I
is fine, right?
I don't even remember what I said. I was too focused on playing games.
Yeah. Yeah, we have 0 views on that video.
Yeah, we need to get our views up.
I
I'll
know
have
it.
to,
I have to start advertising.
I'll have to connect it to my TikTok. I got 1,300 followers
Yeah,
now.
hit it up on that TikTok, bro. Hit 'em up. What
Send it
up?
to all those
What up?
commies.
What up, TikTok viewers? Listen to us talk about things that we don't know.
Yeah, I'll have to figure out how to link it. That'd be cool.
Yeah, we could do it. Just copy the URL to your video and stick it in your bio.
Yeah, that'd be a good idea. How do you get it on some of these other websites like Stitcher and
I have no
all that
idea.
jazz?
I have no idea. I would have to look at it. Let's see.
Yeah, we'll have to check that out because I know a lot of people use those other apps for stuff like this
Right.
rather than YouTube.
Let's see now. Partner portal. Dive into the data. Add your podcast to Stitcher. Is it going to be this easy?
Mm.
Join us. Join us. Okay, reach your audience everywhere. What the heck? I don't have an RSS feed. Well, we're going to need to figure something out.
All right, we'll figure it out later. We'll
Uh,
just have fun this time.
yeah, sounds good.
All right, so we're going to talk about ghosts
Yay,
and other
ghosts.
ghostly related things. This will be more of a fun podcast
Yeah, not so serious.
because I believe in ghosts. I've had a number of experiences
I'm on the
that has made me a believer.
I'm on the fence. I'm on the fence about ghosts because I'm just on the fence about it. That's all there is to it.
That's all right. I mean, if you don't have a bunch of experiences, makes it a little harder.
Gotta see it to believe it, I guess. I don't know. I just remember watching those ghost TV shows where these like a bunch of virgins go into an old schoolhouse, and they're like, "Oh my gosh, look at all this asbestos. I'm can't breathe very well. Oh, and now I can't. Now I see this ghost on my camera. Oh wait, hold on. Nope, that was dust. Let's try again. Oh no, this
Yeah,
dust is definitely a ghost now."
those are my favorite. They're like, look at this light anomaly that's occurring on my screen.
I know,
Like,
it's like
I think that was a moth.
right. Or they like get like an old timey radio, and they're like, "Oh yeah, look at this. The old timey radio says that if you listen to it backwards while smoking ganja, then you can totally hear this ghost saying my name. It's here. Listen, listen, listen." Not very believable.
Or they do the recordings and there's like a little blip. They're like, I think that said, Steve, you're gonna die.
Sorry,
Like,
Steve. I have to kill you now.
yeah,
What?
there's a bunch of stuff out there that makes it hard to believe.
Yeah, I mean, and it's not to say that there isn't like paranormal things, because I believe that there's a life after death, but I don't think that necessarily means I have to like that people's spirits are just chilling, like wanting to talk to us and cause us problem because they're mad or something. I feel like after a while they'd just be like, all right, I need to move on. Need to
Yeah.
stop being a ghost.
Well, one of the theories out there is it's like a emotional imprint to an area. Like if
Mm.
something intense happens, that's kind of like a frequency that stays in the area and repeats over and over again.
So, but like, wouldn't that frequency be interrupted, like by cell phones and crap?
Maybe. I don't know enough about that stuff.
I mean, because
But
like,
that's just one of the things that are floated out there. Like it's just a repeating event. Kind of like, okay, so we'll use like a scientific example
okay, I'm ready.
where with the Big Bang how they try to prove it is if a giant explosion occurs and there's going to be a certain frequency of, uh, I guess, waves, like
Mm-hmm.
sound waves. And so they can track that. And so that gives them an idea of the origin or the direction that it came from. And it's like a consistent wave that continuously goes out
Okay,
from
sure.
that center point.
So, but
So
that's
it's a
like the
residual from the initial, if that makes sense.
yeah, I gotcha. I gotcha.
And
Well, and like
obviously,
obviously like
on
events that happen to objects that you can see like the remnants of some events that happen to objects.
yeah, or like on a smaller scale, you drop a rock into a river, and you get the ripples
Mm-hmm.
that come out and then come back and then repeat over and over. That's just one theory that's out there. So if there's something that traumatic happens in that area, like a murder
Right.
or a death, it imprints that emotion or that event, and then it repeats
Gotcha.
itself.
Gotcha.
That's
Gotcha.
a theory.
Okay.
I don't
Okay.
know how
Okay.
valid it
Okay.
is, but I learned that on some of my
Ghost
ghost shows
ghost shows. Neat.
and podcasts
Neat.
and YouTube videos.
Those are all super reliable sources of information.
Yeah, I
Every
basically
one
have
of
a
them. Just see,
I'm sure.
I think they're intriguing. I think it's really
Yeah,
interesting that there have been so many human instances that are so similar that people for whatever reason they relate to ghosts. They seem to be drawn towards them like, oh my gosh, this is something that I've experienced in some way, and I feel they feel connected to those stories for some reason or
yeah,
another. And it's
yeah,
really it's
and
really pretty interesting.
yeah. I think it's a combination of things that draws us towards ghost stories
Mm.
and wondering if ghosts are actually there.
Right.
One, we want to know that there's something after this life. That's
Yeah.
something that we can't truly prove, and but if we can prove that there's ghosts, then it takes us one step closer to an afterlife or something similar to that.
Right. Knowing that there is something after this
Yeah.
life. Yeah.
So there's that aspect, and then there's the aspect of the unknown, and the unknown is always intriguing
Yeah. Yeah.
to
People are
us.
always curious about that for sure. Well, and that's the thing that I think draws me towards ghost stories is just like we don't know why, how, or if any of the ghost stories that we hear about happened in in the
Right.
in the real world. Like I don't know, and I think that's why stories that are vague are often more compelling when they're ghost stories.
Uh-huh.
And I think that's why a lot of people get caught up or duped per se about things on the internet because they're just vague enough but I mean they're not too vague so as to be like I don't that's not saying anything really, but they're just vague enough to where like you don't know everything that's in it, but it sounds
Mm.
true enough to believe.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think like do you remember that Coney 2012 thing? You remember that?
Mm-mm.
It was like this big, weird, like campaign of this fake African warlord. It was like a YouTube
Yeah.
video that went around, and it's like Coney is this really bad dude, and he's the worst, and he wants to kill all these people, and we need to pay a bunch of money to go stop him. And people just
Oh,
ate it up for a while. They're like, "Oh yeah, Coney, blah, I gotta do it. Gotta take care of these people in Africa." And it ended up being 100%,
a hoax.
100% fake, or at least that guy. I mean, the whole like helping people in Africa thing was pretty real, but the guy used this whole premise of this tyrannical warlord.
I must have missed that.
Yeah, here, no,
That's
I'll send you
hilarious,
the
though.
I'll send you the link. Let me see here, Coney, 2012.
Super funny.
But yeah, it was really weird, man. It ended up being been super fake.
Well, I mean, we definitely see a lot of that in general. It's easy for us if we want to believe something
Uh huh.
to be beguiled by other people,
Mhm.
or even if we read something, if it's compelling enough, we want to believe it. I mean, we got plenty of people that believe in the flat Earth theory
Oh
or
heck yeah.
different things like that. They hear a compelling argument and they just buy into it.
Right.
But anyways, all right. So I'll share my first encounter. We'll call it that. So I just got it up.
All right, hold
When
on. So sorry, I
I
was looking at the Coney thing, and it's not 100% fake. This dude wasn't super fake, but the campaign was not. It was not honest in its representation of things. So the
okay.
Coney guy was real, and he was a bad dude, but like a lot of the stuff that they were saying was happening was like really oversimplified. So, anyways, I apologize.
Okay, so he was a real person.
Right.
Yeah, I'll have to read it later. It's kind of funny.
Anyways,
All
ghost
right.
story. Go go go.
So when I was probably like 6 or 7. Um, whose house was I over? Oh, what is his name? Benny Stout.
Oh yeah. Or Daniel.
So or Benny and
I mean, yeah,
Daniel
Benny and
Stout.
Dan. Yeah.
So I was over at their house, and I vividly remember looking down their hall in their house and just seeing two individuals holding hands.
Mhm.
And I asked um, their older sister if she saw if there was anyone down at the end of the hall because it was dark
Yeah.
and it was more like a silhouette. And she was like, "No, I don't see anything." And I asked Daniel, and Daniel couldn't see anything, and they were like both freaked out by me. But I saw it, and I didn't know what it was. I mean, it could have been something that my mind was just making up or putting figures together. You know, there could have been something at the end of the hall, and then my mind just made up the rest.
Right.
But come to find out later on, talking to my sisters, I used to do that to them all the time. Like, I used to ask them if they saw something like a person and there would never be someone there. But I only remember one case of me actually doing it, and it was at Daniels.
Hmm.
So,
So that was
and
like
it's
6 or 7 though, huh?
yeah. So I was young, and your mind is pretty good at making up stuff, like trying to put things together to something you can understand,
Right.
like a person.
Mhm.
But it sounds like I did it multiple times. I only remember one, and I still remember it really well.
Yeah.
Not saying I know what it was, but that is also something that they say is pretty common, especially for young people. They supposedly are connected to the other side more than,
Then like
people that
adults
are
are.
older.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Well, and so I mean, I remember having like weird experiences like that as a kid. Like, and I don't know,
Yeah.
it was like I remember being over at Bryant Deal's house, and we were just chilling. It was like a sleepover, and I saw this like glowy person walking. I could see him kind of behind the trees, walking past the house down the road, right? And it looked like he had like a anteater face, like a long snout, looked almost like a gas mask kind of a thing. But it
Was
looked like he
this
covered
day or
himself.
night?
It was night.
Uh,
Like he covered himself in like glowy, glow stick stuff, you know.
yeah.
And so I was like,
It's a
oh
freaking
no,
alien man.
I know, right? That's what I thought. But at the same time, I think we had like been telling scary stories, and it was pretty late, like later than I usually stayed up,
Yeah.
and so like it's easy to say, well, it was probably because I'm 9 years old and super tired, and we told scary stories, and we, like you said, our minds want to see, our mind can
It'll
trick
it'll
us into seeing things that aren't really there.
yeah, it'll fill in the gaps.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like those tricky things that you see on the internet where it's like stare at this circle for 1 minute and then it takes the circle away and it still looks like it's there even though it's not.
Mhm. Yeah. So, okay, let's say that you might have been slightly altered because you were young,
Uh
you
huh.
stayed up late, and you were telling scary stories. But with that all aside, you still saw something,
Yeah, sure.
and it was something that was glowing. That's also something that's weird
Mhm.
because there was light emanating from whatever it was,
Right.
some sort of light.
I mean, and it could have just been moonlight, and could have just been that because from what I remember, and it was a long time ago, I feel like there was moonlight and it was shining through the trees and kind of, illuminating different branches. Is that was fairly
Gotcha.
easy to get tripped up by things.
I don't know. Maybe you saw an alien.
Freaking alien.
Okay, so moving on from when we were younger,
Mhm.
you did have an experience. It could be discounted because of X, Y, or Z, including mine.
Mhm.
So we'll say that we'll just discard those for now.
Okay, I'm ready. Hit me with your
So
best shot.
this one I already shared with you,
Mm.
but it was um, in that old house where supposedly someone died, and I was by the bed, and I lost all strength in my body and almost fell down. And then I left that building and I felt completely fine after I left. So, what would cause my body to lose all its strength at one moment in time?
I think. Well, so you went to. It was just a random building, or were you going to that building for any particular purpose, or what?
So, oh, we supposedly someone had died in the house.
Oh, okay.
And
And
it was an older building.
is that why you went to that place? Like because
That
you wanted to
wasn't
be
originally, but
spooky?
it was like a side note.
Okay, sure.
So we were going. It was Thomas Elkington's
Oh,
house,
that's right. Yeah, yeah.
and they had this small cottage-like house on their property that I think his uncle or cousin was living in at the time.
Mhm.
And we were just getting a tour of his place before we hung out and had a bonfire.
Mhm.
And when we went to the house, Thomas was like, "Oh yeah, this is where my uncle lives. It's kind of a creepy place. Um, someone died here like a long time ago."
Right.
So as a side note, it wasn't the purpose wasn't to like, "Oh, this is a haunted place. Let's go in." But when I went up to the upstairs, there was a bed, and I was standing next to the bed, and I lost all the strength and I lost my vision for a period of time.
Right.
And so I was like freaked out, and I left that little cottage and went outside, and then I didn't have another problem the rest of the day.
Hmm.
And the feeling that I had also left because I felt like super freaked out once that happened.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's something common that they share in some of these supernatural shows and experiences where they say the energy leaves their body and they feel like they're gonna pass out.
I gotcha. So I mean, what if though? So what I would like to see is if these people, when they have those experiences, do they know beforehand that oh yeah,
Like a haunted
this is a
place.
haunted place, right? And that's what it like.
Yeah.
A lot of people they go into a place like, okay, this is a haunted place. I'm so ready to see something that is, so crazy
Scary.
and so
Yeah.
scary, and they're like waiting to see what shows up. And so I feel like in that way, um, it's like the same thing with, I feel like, the people who do the holy roller thing. They're like speaking in tongues and all that, and they roll around on the floor because they feel the spirit, right?
Yeah.
I think that could also. I think that is partially because they've convinced their brain that this is that's how the spirit talks to them when they feel God's presence. They feel like they need to roll around on the floor and speak in tongues, and they have, the pastor says some profound thing to them, and they, oh, that's it. That's, I feel that way, and they roll around on the floor and blah blah.
Yeah.
And so
All
what
right.
if I could see the same thing happening?
So I'm gonna come back and say this period of time, you knew how I grew up, right?
Yeah.
Pretty sheltered,
Yeah.
to say the least. We didn't have cable or anything like that.
You didn't have cable?
No, we didn't have cable. Kidding me?
Yeah. We had cable because the cable company didn't stop giving it to us. It was just there.
Really?
Yeah, my parents were like, "Hey guys, we don't need this. Like, we don't need this cable. We don't want to, like, they really had a bunch of stuff
Uh-huh.
with it instead of just the standard channels."
Yeah.
And we told them it was like 10 years. And they were like, yeah, whatever. They didn't do anything. And then finally one day it disappeared.
You're like,
I know
no.
my brothers were actually legit crying. You're not gonna be able to watch my show.
That's too funny.
Yeah, it was really great.
Yeah, I was always super jealous of you. It's like, oh man, they have Cartoon Network.
I know, it was
What the
legit.
heck? I need that.
It was legit until it was gone.
Yeah, sucks not having it.
Yeah. Anyways, go ahead.
So you use the example of the Holy Rollers.
Right.
They have an example of what should occur in that situation.
Mm-hmm.
So people before them have, quote unquote, felt the spirit through speaking in tongues or rolling on the floor or being healed, whatever it might be. And people following them, or a younger generation, has seen that example, and so that is how they manifest the Holy Spirit, right?
Right.
Me at that time, I had no access to scary ghost story shows at all.
Mm.
So the traditional losing the energy from your body in that situation, I was not exposed to.
Okay.
So I was completely ignorant to that being one of the signs of some kind of encounter with a spirit.
Gotcha. So was it like a super dank house with like stale air and all that, or was it like?
I mean, it was like an old cabin feel, but I wouldn't say that it smelled like mildew or grossness. Like it was, I mean, Idaho's pretty dry.
Yeah. So I mean, but his uncle was like actively living in there, or no?
Yeah, he was.
Okay. Because that's one of the things when people go to these like quote unquote haunted houses, right?
Yeah.
They go to these super old buildings that have like asbestos, and they've not had people in them or airflow for like months or years. And they say that there's like a higher than normal concentration of carbon monoxide, right?
Yeah.
And people get lightheaded on it, and they don't think as clearly because it's not something that you're supposed to have in your system as much as it does. And they get all
loopy,
and they're like, oh, there's a ghost. Oh no, right?
Yeah.
And so that's why I asked that question, is because I feel like that
It could have
been
been
one of
something
the
in the air
explanations, but
altering it. But yeah, someone was living in it actively. So that's just saying. There was no reason in my head that I should have had that happen.
Yeah.
Because I didn't understand that's one of the signs of having some kind of encounter, and it was somewhere where someone lived actively And yeah, I did know that supposedly something had happened there, and it was kind of like a little creepy place.
Mm-hmm.
But that was the extent of it. That was the main reason why we were there.
Gotcha.
So in my mind, it was pretty legit. Like it freaked me out because I didn't know what was going on. I was like, "Holy crap!" Like I got no strength in my body, and I think it was Matt. Matt caught me,
Oh, he
and
caught
I
you
was like,
from falling?
"Yeah," and I was like, "I gotta get out of here, man." And we left. And once I got outside, I didn't have a problem. And I've never had that happen. It's like when you lay down in the bath in hot water, and all your blood's in different regions of your body, and then you stand up and you get that super lightheaded, and all the energy kind of goes out of your body. It was similar to that, except we had been walking around for
Ride
20,
with you for
30
a while.
minutes. Yeah, so kind of crazy. It
Yeah.
kind of freaked me out.
Right, right. And
I didn't see anything though.
yeah, I mean, just felt it, right?
Yeah,
Well, and, like I feel like um,
bad
I felt bad
feelings.
feelings, you know?
Yeah.
I felt bad feelings, and I don't know if that's like, because I feel like when I see a bad person, I have a pretty good eye, I feel, to be like, oh, that is a bad person.
Well, you haven't called me out yet.
I know, right? But you haven't murdered anybody. I know that.
Hmm?
Hmm?
No, just kidding.
But, I mean, it's. That's like what modern horror films do anymore. Is they're like,
Yeah.
there's no supernatural stuff, but there are really bad people. Dun dun dun. You know, and that's like the thing over and over again, and it's like, that's pretty lame because it ruins like the element of mystique that comes from the supernatural,
Hmm.
and doesn't ever. I don't know. It just is like, yeah, I know humans suck. Thank you for that. Like, I'm just gonna go and live in my depressed world now. Thank you. But I don't know. I like I said, I really do enjoy like the stories of supernatural things. I just, again, have a hard time believing them. And that's something like this kind of leads into something that I wanted to talk about with the skinwalkers, because they're really curious. Not ghosts, they're witches apparently. People who like want to do harm to innocent people for no reason, and that's like why they're never really spoken about by the cultures that it comes from, is because supposedly the more you know about them, the more they will be around you, the more that they seek you out, right?
Yeah.
And
Which has a certain amount of logic
sure.
to it. But yeah, the skinwalkers, my understanding is there's several Native American tribes that this legend comes from, where the skinwalker is some kind of witch
Mm-hmm.
doctor or witch that has, for whatever reason, decided to basically change forms and attack people or maim people that either tread on sacred ground or go places that they shouldn't.
Right.
Or like what you're saying, mess mess with them enough that they draw their attraction,
Right.
or they attract them to them.
It's just, I don't know.
So
But
what did when in your reading what is a skinwalker? Like what is the description of a skinwalker?
well, that's the thing, is that they change shape. They metamorphize. They don't look like any one thing. They can change into animals. They can change into humans. They can look like people that you know. There's lots of different things. Like there was a weird, stupid little, super short story. I got it right here. It says, and and this is from Twitter, I think. It says, I'm sick of pointing a gun at my dad through my window at 2 a.m. as he pleads, come on, Jake, let your old pa in, I'm tired. And replying, you're not my dad. He's asleep in the other room. I hear him snoring, and then watching his expression go sour as he turns back towards the woods. Like, creepy.
Yeah, that's creepy
Like,
as heck.
freaking creepy, but like... And that's what makes the Skinwalker so interesting to me. But
I'd
like
probably poop my pants.
it's this whole mystique about it that we just do not understand what these things are if they exist, right? And then supposedly as we learn more about them, they make themselves more present to us. And it just seems kind of like this weird
It's basically the Western form of a demon, where people in the Western world. There's Ouija boards and different things like that that can draw demon-like things to you. It sounds like skinwalkers are a form of that.
Yeah.
It's the dark side of things that when you dwell on it enough, you're going to draw the eye or you're going to draw the attention to you.
Right. Yeah.
But
Well, I mean,
in
it
certain
kind of,
cultures, there's
yeah.
like certain areas where supposedly these are more present that they won't even go to. So I think there's also a component of like a geographical area that they are located as well, as far as my understanding goes.
Yeah, no, I agree. Like there are certain places where those tribes will not ever go, and it's like this weird line between sacred and
Unholy.
unholy, right? And it's and they don't ever tell you what that is, right? They don't ever. It's hard for even them to delineate between the two.
What do you think people are experiencing when they have some kind of encounter? Or is it all in their head?
I don't know. I I really don't know.
Tell me what you think, and then tell me if it is occurring, what do you think it is?
I think part of it, like especially because experiences can be a lot of different things, right? For one, I think that our minds can do amazing things more than we give our minds credit for.
Yeah.
I mean, just look at people who do hallucinogenic drugs. Like, our minds still create those images. It's upon the stimuli of those substances.
Mm-hmm.
And so it is really cool that our minds can do that. And so I think that it's important to recognize that when we want to see something, that it can be presented to ourselves, or our minds can present that to us. But at the same time, many of these things happen unprovoked. Like, people aren't looking for those experiences. But it does seem to have a pattern, though. In some instances, like there are a lot of people who have these experiences that are like, oh yeah, I was camping and I was drinking a whole lot, and it was really I saw all these crazy things, and
So we could definitely discount those, obviously. Those are wishy-washy at best. But we have Doug in here now. So we're
Hi.
talking about skinwalkers right
Skinwalkers.
now. Yeah, so we were talking about ghosts. I talked about a couple experiences that I had, and then I found out that Keaton's freaking seen an alien and he doesn't want to admit it.
What, really?
No, I saw something when I was like 9 years old. It looked like a weird little alien thing.
Oh,
It was
interesting.
at night, and
But
I was
he's reasoned it away.
yeah,
But it was a freaking alien
or a ghost, right?
or a ghost, yeah. But anyways, tell that story, Keaton, and then we can get back to
Well,
skinwalkers,
okay,
and then we'll get Doug's perspective.
so like people will often I feel like the biggest thing is people hear a noise. The noise is different than they've ever heard. And so their mind, they hear this noise that they haven't heard before, and they're like, oh, okay. So in my mind, since I didn't really know what that their mind interprets it, I didn't really know what that sound was, so I need to kind of fill in the blanks.
Yeah.
So,
Mm-hmm.
oh wow, I'm out in the middle of the forest. I hear this noise, and it sounds like a kid saying, "Hey, yeah, okay, that's what it sounds the closest like. That's the thing that I know, and so I'm gonna make it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna point towards that thing being what it is, right?"
Yeah.
Like my wife has a few aunts. They went traveling around like South America when they were younger, and they were like, "Oh yeah, I totally believe in Bigfoot." And I was like, "Why do you believe in Bigfoot?" And they said, "Well, I was in South America. We were camping. We're out in the wilderness, and we hear these animals calling to each other across our camp. And it was, I've never heard that sound before. It was totally something that was, it was like sounded like a human, but it wasn't really human. And so they are like, oh yeah, that was definitely Bigfoot." And it's just like, well, I mean, you don't know every animal in the world, first of all. Not all animals follow the exact same patterns that other animals do. So it should be, our mind, again, our minds fill in the blanks of things that we don't understand.
But that is still something that's the unknown.
Right,
Like, yeah, it could be an animal, but there is a element of not knowing.
right. Well, and that's
So
that's where the
oftentimes
intrigue
when
comes from.
right, oftentimes when you do figure out what it actually is, it's really boring. Like
Yeah.
every time people submit a hair of Bigfoot, it ends up being like a bear's hair, right?
Uh
Like
huh. Yeah.
and weird fuzzy photos of Bigfoot turns out to be like a maimed bear or something, like stuff like that. It always ends up being something so boring. Like the intrigue is the unknown, right?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
So,
So
um,
let's go back a little bit for Doug. Um, well, I'll do a little bit of my ghost experiences, and then we'll get back to the skinwalker. But I've had experiences in the past that make me believe in ghosts. Like hands down, I believe that there's some weird ghosty stuff going on. Thomas Elkington's place. He has a little shack on his property, or a little building on his property that he had like an uncle or cousin living at the time. Supposedly someone had passed away, like a family member or something previously. That was the only backstory that I got before we were taking a tour of this little building.
Mm-hmm.
At the top, there was like a little room, and by the bed, I lost all strength in my body, and I think it was Matt or Josh caught me, and I was like, okay, I got to get out of here. Like, I just lost all strength. Keaton brought up, all right, well, it's kind of like Pentecostals. Pentecostals
hmm
fill the spirit and all these different things. Um, but my argument is Pentecostals have seen an example of another person, quote unquote, filling the spirit, right? They've been raised in that culture, or they've seen someone recently that, fills the spirit,
so you're
rolls
saying they're
around.
conditioned into that.
Yes. Me, in that state, I grew up in a home that I didn't watch any, like, ghost shows. I didn't watch, so I wasn't exposed to the normal, this is what happens when you have an encounter with a spirit, which my experience does line up with some of the stuff that you see on TV. So my argument is I experienced something that I wasn't conditioned to react to, if that makes sense.
hmm
But that's one example. And then I've had experiences when I was younger. I used to see people. all the time, like figures holding hands, or it was always someone holding hands. The only time that I remember is at a friend's house down the hall. I saw two silhouetted people holding hands. Come to find out, I asked my siblings. I used to tell them that all the time, like I used to creep them out. So, but anyways,
Yeah.
what do you think about these experiences? And then Keaton
Uh,
will share his alien experience because that one I still
yeah,
think
I
he saw
definitely
an
want to hear
alien.
that. I want to hear that. But yeah. So I tend to agree with Keaton a lot of times. I mean, we are like programmed to see patterns in things, right? Like that's how we conquer nature better than the animals is we see
Yeah,
patterns in things and we analyze things and we make inferences from limited data and then we make decisions based on those inferences. And because that circuitry in our brain is so powerful, we find really sophisticated patterns in low resolution data like shadows, right?
okay.
So
I
we see
yeah, so
shadows
I
and we come up with sophisticated patterns and then we record that as a memory.
okay. Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I can agree, and that's actually exactly what I told Keaton. I was like, our minds fill in the blanks, and I could, as a kid, I could have just been filling in the blanks.
Yeah, and then our memories are also really bad because we don't record the actual data that was the sensory data, right? We don't remember the actual shapes of the shadows and stuff. We remember what we processed of that,
Yeah, that's true.
right?
That's true.
So,
Well, and that's
What
that's
about
so I,
why
this?
that's why
yeah,
it's so hard to get accurate information from people after a crime happens, is because they're like, "Oh my gosh, I was so scared."
yeah, notorious like witness testimony is notoriously bad. You have to have like corroborating data to really, corroborating evidence to really solidify a case because witness testimony is so notoriously unreliable.
Mhm.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. What about the second experience? Because I was a lot older. I think it was when I was like 16 or 17.
Yeah, that one's harder to describe, and I don't know because, I haven't really um, I haven't really encountered anything like that myself, or like, I mean, I've seen shadows and shapes, growing up and stuff, so
Yeah.
I've had similar experiences like that, but I haven't really had anything like you described there. Um, but like, so you said you were just like falling unconscious, like you couldn't move, or like, describe
Uh,
it again. I didn't quite
the
catch.
way that I would describe it is when, say, you're taking like a hot bath, you're laying
Hmm.
down, and then you decide you're done. You get up, and all the blood's trying to go back to your brain or whatever.
So
And
it's like standing up quickly and you're like falling over, sort of
yeah,
thing. Like,
except I also like lost my vision at the same time. But we had been walking around for 15, 20 minutes prior to this,
hmm,
and so there wasn't anything like correlating before. Like I hadn't changed anything,
right.
if that makes sense.
Yeah, I don't know. It almost just sounds like low blood sugar, to be honest. But I mean, that probably oversimplifies it. Like,
But then it left me. Like when I left the building,
yeah,
I was fine for like a long period of like I didn't have any other issues.
yeah, I don't know. It could have been a coincidence. You had low blood sugar at the same time. I mean, that seems
Stupid
like really hand
coincidence.
wavy, but
Yeah, yeah.
I
but
mean, yeah, there's definitely something, but in my head, I definitely experienced something and it freaked
right.
the crap out of me. I was like, okay, I'm not staying here.
Well, see, the closest experience I've had to something like that was when I was younger. Uh, I went with my dad out changing water in a field, and he hopped a fence. He's like, "You just wait right here," and he went away for a bit, and I was just waiting there, and then I felt like someone behind me had like just shoved me. I was like, "What the heck's going on?" And I had no idea why. Like all of a sudden, and I looked and there's no one there. Anyway, come to find out later, the fence was an electric fence, and I was holding on to it, and it had a pulse, and it convulsed my body. I didn't recognize it as electricity. I just thought somebody had shoved me. So like,
Oh,
so I wonder if it's something like that. Like there's an experience in your body, like a new like. Have you ever experienced extremely low blood sugar where you almost want to pass out? If you
yeah,
have never experienced that before, you might interpret those that experience as like some sort of supernatural event, right?
Yeah,
Where your
that's
body
true.
isn't behaving how you're used to and that sort of thing.
Yeah, it could have
I
been
don't know.
because I've never experienced it since, and I never had before. So it was a phenomena,
Yeah.
whatever it was.
I don't know, but I can't discount that there was actually some supernatural thing, but ideally it would be more repeatable, right?
Mm.
Yeah.
Well, and that's the thing that I mean. So as great as we are as a human race in learning new things and like we always rely on repeatability
Hmm.
in
Hmm.
order to determine whether something is or is not working, right?
Right.
But even with all of that, even with repeatability, there are still tons of examples where doing the same thing in the same conditions doesn't produce the same results.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Like with medicine, we rely on statistics almost solely, and it's okay. It's a good way to do that, but it still isn't the best way. It doesn't work for
It's
each
not like you
individual.
can, yeah. You can't just like, you know, create the whole world in a lab, right? And test all your variables. Yeah.
Well, and so
All
so
right,
here,
Keaton,
yeah,
tell your alien
my
story,
alien story. So
because
my
this one I believe.
So okay, so let me paint
Saw a
let me paint
freaking
the
alien.
picture. Let me paint the picture a little better. So we were at Brian Deal's house. It was late. It was pretty late. We had been staying up. We'd been watching movies and or hanging out, eating popcorn off the floor like we did because we were weirdos, and we were telling spooky stories or something. And I remember sitting in their front room, and from their front room they have a large window, and they have a bunch of trees on the edge of their property, and there's a fence just beyond the first line of trees, and then the road, Yukon Cemetery Road, right? And so
Hmm.
I was looking out the window. There was light in the house. There's a nice soft orangish light like you get from a light bulb in a house. And I was looking out towards the road, and I thought I saw this thing. It had this weird like elephantine trunk that came off of its face, and it kind of had longer arms, and it was kind of walking in an odd way, and it almost looked like a person with a gas mask on, like those old-timey gas masks with a hose
Right.
that came
Yeah.
down, right? And they glowed a green glow like they were covered in the glow stick material. And I saw them for a minute, for just a split second, a couple of times, and then they were gone. And we talked about it, and I was like, oh my gosh, the scary thing. But again, like 9 years old, probably a little
Yeah.
bit sleep deprived, probably a little bit like
You
fed
were already
into it.
spooked out a little, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and like you don't
Still an
have in your
alien.
memory, you don't have the actual sensory data that was feeding that to you, right?
Right.
You just have what you processed and saw out of it. So,
Exactly. Exactly. So
but who
I
knows? Maybe it was something weird. Like, I don't know.
so I will
Maybe it was an alien.
right.
Just saying.
I will say though, there is something to be said about some people. So
Skinwalkers.
let's go into like the ghosts that are like the human ghosts, so to speak, the bad things in our lives that are done by people.
Hmm.
So so I just listened to a bunch of stuff about Ted Bundy. Ted Bundy was one of the most prolific serial killers of our time. He murdered something in the realm of like 40 women over the course of like 10 years, I think.
Hmm.
And he has this uncanny ability to just manipulate the crap out of people. Even though he had admitted to murdering people, he still had people, oh, he should be set free. He should be absolved of his crimes, etc., etc., etc. And he was a charming individual, but he also knew how to manipulate and to make people feel bad for him, even though he had done terrible things. And he had this strange insight into people. I mean, he was able to manipulate people into like getting into his car with him without even really like just the loosest, weakest backstory in the world, and people were like, "Oh yeah, cool, no worries, I'll do that." and then you would take them to a place, kill them, and do unspeakable things to them, and then lay their body somewhere, right?
Mhm.
And so that is one instance of things that I think are in a way supernatural, of these people's ability to read other people and then to manipulate that. The other thing that I think is interesting is like schizophrenics, or people who have visual and auditory hallucinations. We have found that we can control those by affecting serotonin and dopamine in the brain. We can stop those hallucinations, and people can, live their lives without having those in their, affecting their everyday being. But I also wonder if that change in neurotransmitters and neurohormones are kind of thinning a veil between something that we don't quite understand yet. Because
Mhm.
they can look at a wall and they can see a face like formed out of the features of the wall just by looking at the textures. And I've had similar experiences. I remember distinctly there was a bathroom scale that we got from my great grandfather, because he died, and they're like, take whatever you want from his house, and I was like, I want this bathroom scale. Didn't accurately
Makes
display
sense.
weight, but I was like 7 when he died, so I was like, okay, I guess I'll
I
grab
think I
this.
used that a couple
Yeah,
times.
you
Was it
remember that
downstairs in the
like
bathroom?
the white and black with like the weird.
Yes.
So I would look at
Use it
that.
all the time.
I would look at that while I was using the bathroom, and I would see, I could pick out like faces or different, interesting shapes that looked like something I knew in the black and white markings on that scale. And so, just colloquially, it does seem like there is, like, obviously it kind of goes back to our minds filling in things to make it more familiar for us, but at the same time, with schizophrenics, it's so intrusive. It's not something that they really have to put together. Other people don't see it.
Right.
And it's also interesting to note that, those 3D puzzles,
Uh-huh.
like, or the things, like in Disney World, the faces that look like they're following you. Do you know that?
Yeah. Uh-huh. Yeah. Yeah.
It's like an indentation. Like if you were to get some clay and put your face in it, that would, if you were to hold that up and have it
Right.
walk
Yeah.
past so many people, it would look like it was following them. People with schizophrenia, they don't see that. They don't see those things following them. They can see, no, that's just a person. That's just an indentation of a face. That's not something that's
Hmm.
actually following me.
That's interesting.
So they have an insight into that for whatever reason because of their condition. And so there's lots of things that we still don't quite understand about those people and about the things that they have experienced that makes me think that there may be something that is to these ghost stories. And that's why I'm not like, no, I don't believe in any ghosts ever in the whole world, but I am skeptic of it.
So you think that there might be a. Let me try to bring together all that you were saying. So you brought up sociopaths,
Yep.
schizophrenics,
Yep.
and then brought it into the realm of us seeing things that our minds want us to see.
Yes.
So you're saying that in schizophrenics, they might be seeing something that is there on a different plane, for a lack of a better term,
Right.
that
It's
the rest of us are not seeing. But us being on a different wavelength or plane see things in an alternate way as well. So they're both true, but we're just experiencing it differently.
right. So think of it
Okay.
in this way, and Doug, you can probably explain this better than I can. I remember there was a Carl Sagan video where he talked about the fourth dimension.
Mm-hmm.
And so if we imagine a whole group of people who are made of only lines, they're two-dimensional. They only have two axes of existence. On 2 dimensions, on a piece of paper, I can draw a cube, right? And it's a three-dimensional shape that's represented on a two-dimensional piece of paper.
Yeah.
And so if you were to get a person from the 2D world and we took them, we made them 3D and they got to experience it, and then we threw them back into the 2D world, they would be like, holy cow, I experienced this whole new thing. This is what it looks like. And he drew out a cube and a circle and a sphere and all this other things and kind of showed, oh my gosh, look at all this cool stuff.
Hmm.
But the 2D people still don't understand the concept of how to orient themselves in 3 dimensions, how to move in 3 dimensions, because they only experience 2 dimensions.
Yeah.
Right? They don't experience what truly is 3D as far as what they see, because again, they're only 2 dimensional. So the same thing goes for the fourth dimension in us. Like, we live in the third dimension, and we can represent the fourth dimension in our 3 dimensions. I'll send you a picture. They call it a tesseract. Isn't that right, Doug?
Yep, that's right.
Physics. There we go. So they call it a tesseract, and it's supposedly a 4-dimensional shape in 3 dimensions.
Yeah, it's the analog of a cube. Like going from square to a cube, that's going from 2D to 3D. Going from a cube to a tesseract is 3D to 4D.
Right. And so it's really confusing. It doesn't make any sense to my brain because, again, we don't live in 4 dimensions. We live in 3 dimensions.
And the math, it's kind of interesting when you talk about that because all of our math that describes geometry and physics and stuff in 3 dimensions can be expanded to 4 dimensions and it still works out. So if there were a 4 dimensional existence, if it exists, then we have the math to
Mathematically,
describe it, but our brains just can't really grasp it very well.
Mm-hmm. And so I feel like maybe, perhaps,
there's another dimension.
I mean, there definitely is. I feel like there is, but we are unable to see it. And maybe, just maybe, people who have those psychotic episodes, who are seeing those hallucinations, and people who are, and I feel like also people who take psychedelics, they're somehow, and maybe not accessing the fourth dimension per se, but are accessing a different state of consciousness than was previously thought to be possible.
Hey, I'm not going to dispute it. I think there's something to a lot of these things. I think it's just too easy to discount all things and try to explain everything away
Mm-hmm.
instead of exploring the possibility of something else occurring.
It's true, and I think we have to be very, very careful about that because we can actually find examples of this in history. Like in the 1800s, farmers would report rocks falling from the sky, right, landing in their fields and stuff,
Mm-hmm.
and all throughout Europe, this would be reported, and the scientists at the time were like, "This is impossible. Rocks can't come from the sky. It just can't be done." Right? So they just discount it immediately because it doesn't fit their worldview and their narrative.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it turns out that these farmers were correct. They were describing meteorites, right? So, but so something similar exists today. We like to believe that we have a complete working model of reality as, a scientific one that explains everything, but we don't.
Mm-hmm.
So even though, like Keaton, I err on the side of being skeptical about ghost encounters and this sort of thing, I also recognize that it's not like we have, it's not like the working model that we have of reality necessarily is correct. There could be things that unknown things that we just don't know about, and we should be
Yeah,
open to them.
and I think your guys' approach is a good one, and I honestly fall into your guys' camp most of the time. I just like to entertain the idea longer than you guys might.
Mm-hmm.
The reason being is there is an experience that is occurring, and if we can't explain it away, then why not explore the idea that it might be some kind of phenomenon that we don't understand?
Yeah. No, I actually agree. Like, um, if someone comes to me and they swear they saw something that they can't explain,
Yeah.
like a ghost or whatever, I'm not going to immediately be like, oh, well, it was totally just your imagination, right? Like, I
Yeah.
don't think there's any value in that. So I agree. I like it. there's no harm in exploring it. I think the harm comes when you start treating that possibility
as an
as the
absolute.
only possibility. Yeah, as the only one, right? Like
Yeah.
it was definitely a ghost, definitely aliens. They're gonna invade tomorrow or what? Like you can see
Yeah.
how far some of these people take this kind of stuff.
Right.
Like
Yeah.
so, yeah, that's the danger. The danger isn't entertaining the possibility; it's just taking it to the extremes, right?
Yep.
And I think what Keaton was diving into earlier, a good way for us to try to understand, quote unquote, the spiritual realm or where ghosts are and all that stuff is in our physical world right now. So he brought up psychopaths or people that we encounter that intuitively we have a response to. Like there is something, whether it be body language, whether it be nonverbal communication, whether it be hormones that are being released into the airs that our bodies are reacting to. There is some kind of reaction that we're having to other people that tell us things that are not verbal, things that are not necessarily something that we can pick up by our normal senses or our perceived senses. So I think that gives us a little snapshot into something that might be of a spiritual sense. You know, we all carry a certain amount of our spirit, at least most, I believe that we all have a spirit, and I think that we do communicate spirit to spirit. And so we're having some kind of interaction. And so those people that do terrible things, we can pick up on it on a certain frequency.
Mm-hmm. Well, and there is
And there could be a lot of examples like I listed, but
there are super weird phenomenons. Like there's some kind of synergistic relationship, like when you work with someone, and I mean, I'm sure that you've had this experience where you're doing a project with someone and you both get this, you're on the same page, you both
mm-hmm.
understand the things that you're trying to do, and so you
Mm-hmm.
work way better after getting on the same page and being in sync is what a lot of people call it.
Yeah.
Um, they they found that your brains match wavelengths during those
Oh,
periods of time.
interesting.
Yeah, and that's probably dumbing it down a lot, and I think there's probably a little bit more to that. But I mean, that's essentially the idea of it is that in some of the wavelengths that were produced by the brain, they found that they were the same between the two people who were working in such a synergistic way. And so, like Spencer said, I feel like there may be some more things that we just have this extra sensory perception of that we don't understand, where we see someone or we see something that resonates with our minds in that instance, um, or when we see a person that seems off, like we kind of are able to sense that without seeing anything more than just maybe a few body language clues and having a feeling, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, and we're still learning about all these things, and the more we learn about it, the more we realize that there's so much more to human interaction than we may have initially purported.
That kind of reminds me of how it wasn't until fairly recently that scientists discovered how huge a role like pheromones play
Yep.
in human interactions, whereas
Mm-hmm.
before they're like, oh no, that's only an animal thing. Like they just recently discovered that, oh no, it's actually a human thing too.
That's how
So
periods sync up for ladies. Just throwing that out there.
Yeah.
It legitimately happens. The more socially prominent female will sync up the other females.
Well, I think that also plays into like
And,
the stupid crap that teenagers do.
What do you mean?
So there's been like a bunch of fads that have happened over the years that dudes will do, I feel, more than women. Most recently I heard about this thing. It was like the hot water challenge.
Sounds bad already.
Yeah, it's terrible. So it's like, okay, go watch this water in a pot boil. Then you have to dump it on yourself somewhere on your body.
Oh, jeez.
And it's not necessarily like getting it to be boiling, but it's like, okay, you have to put this water on the stove, you have to turn it on, and we have to, like, when we say, that's when you have to dump it on your, you have to take it off the stove and dump it on your body. This one kid, it's like a friend of my coworker's son. He dumped it on his junk
Oh,
and
jeez.
like burnt his pee-pee really bad and had to go to the hospital in Utah. Like,
So what does this have to do with anything?
So I think even though
I was talking about pheromones and how it
listen,
syncs
listen,
up
listen,
ladies.
listen. This is totally connected.
This is actual science skiing.
I
We're
think
not
that-
talking about pouring water on PBs.
I think that people like are generally wise enough to like, okay, I shouldn't pour hot water on myself, right?
Okay.
But when they're in groups of people together and they're just like excited about something and they get worked up, they're totally willing to be like, yeah, of course I have to pour water on my hot boiling water on my junk, so, so that I can be cool. And I don't think that like our minds are like, oh yeah, I'm totally cool with this. I think that it's overcome by neurotransmitters and pheromones.
Yeah.
There you go. That's my tie into that. Sorry.
Okay. But yeah, I mean, it's a legit phenomenon. Females, like and it happens in other species. The alpha female will sync up the subordinates,
Mm-hmm.
and they do that through pheromones. And obviously, there's going to be a certain amount of um, social cues that probably suppress certain things in the body.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but anyways, kind of a random tangent.
I'm the alpha female.
But I mean, like Doug was saying, pheromones and these things do play a bigger role in. So maybe there is something to do with the chemicals that your body is giving off for some of these sociopaths that our subconscious is picking up on
Mhm.
through just generations of experience.
Yeah, that's very possible.
Well, because I mean, epigenetics is a thing. Have you heard about
Yeah.
epigenetics?
I have not.
So
Enlighten
epigenetics
me.
is some interesting phenomenon where experiences are so. Oh shoot, Doug, do you know how to explain it?
Are
Yeah,
you
so
talking about like
epigenetics is
video
like-
game stuff?
No. Listen.
So epigenetics is it's about gene expression. So when
Okay.
we have our DNA is encoded for lots of different scenarios,
Yeah.
but not everything that's in your DNA is activated at the same time. So epigenetics is a process where genes are activated based on the environment.
Gotcha.
So a lot of times, this is true of humans and most species, not all of your genes will be used at any given time, only the ones that are expressed. Some genes will always be expressed, right?
Yeah.
No matter what, like your hair color or whatever. But others won't be expressed unless a certain environmental condition triggers them.
Well, I mean, before they thought that it was junk DNA, but then they found out that's just the coding of when it is activated. That makes sense.
Yeah, it could be. I'm not as familiar with all of the encoding stuff.
The only reason why I know that is last week I listened to like 10 hours of Stanford lectures on genetic crap.
Now,
Oh, really?
Now we're constantly learning stuff about genetics.
But that's what he said. Originally they thought that 98%
98%
of
of
like
DNA.
98% was junk DNA, but they found out that's really just the code of when those genes activate
Yeah, and it turns out
and the
that
scenarios.
the code for when certain genes are activated is more complicated than the actual gene, right? Like,
Yeah, that's the 98%,
Yeah.
The other is only, it's only a couple percent. crazy crap.
Mm-hmm.
I'm too dumb to understand it.
No, it's
Thank
not
you,
that.
Stanford, for enlightening me, though.
Yes. Love that, Stanford. No, it's just really interesting because epigenetics, it's like they did
Are you
some
talking like Assassin's Creed, where the history of everyone that's come before you is imprinted the
slightly,
experiences,
slightly.
and
So
so you have the memories of your ancestors?
So they did some experience on rats, and I don't remember the exact experiment, but it was something to the extent of they had one generation of rats, and they whenever they stepped on this pad, it would shock them really bad, right?
Yeah.
And they did stuff similar to that, like they do positive and negative reinforcement through those things. They had those mice produce kids. They separated them immediately, and somehow the generations the generation after knew not to step on those pads.
Gotcha.
So it's something to that extent. And so there is some kind of knowledge that is passed down through DNA with the experiences that we have.
So is that where they come up with phobias?
Could.
Yeah,
Like
actually, that
the
is
history
like
of phobias?
Mm-hmm.
yeah, like if you actually look at people who live in places um, most of us are in the United States are of European ancestry, right?
Yeah.
We have this. Every human has this innate fear of snakes and reptiles. Like
Uh-huh.
Northern Europe has hardly any. There's no dangerous snakes in Northern Europe, but it's innate to every human, and the reason why that is because early on in our history, that's the kind of things that we were dealing with, and it's still encoded in our DNA.
Makes
So it's really
sense to me.
interesting that a lot of these experiences, I mean, uh, in a way, our DNA is a history of all the experiences of our ancestors. Like, we can't possibly gain enough knowledge ourselves, and in our as we're growing up and our learning about the world and everything. We can't learn everything there is to know by experience. Some of the things have to be innate, and that's where this history of the that's encoded in the DNA comes from.
Mm-hmm.
Like we have this innate fear of snakes. Snakes are bad, avoid them, sort of thing. Same with bugs and all sorts of stuff, right?
Well, and
It's kind
Yeah.
of interesting.
it does kind of show in other ways as well because art has evolved in a crazy way over the last while. Like if you look at like the most like lifelike painting that there was in existence back in the 1800s, it looks massively different than the ultra realistic paintings and drawings that we have today. Like we're miles ahead, and it's not like these are being drawn by you know people who have extensive backgrounds. I mean they are, but it's not like they're these people who have worked their entire 90 years of life to perfect ultra realistic paintings. A lot of these are done by kids, like college kids,
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is, another example that we've learned our, through our collective experiences as humans, how to do things better. And it passes on through our DNA.
Makes sense.
I think that's also why so many people are depressed.
I don't know. They find in these third world countries and stuff that they don't suffer from depression nearly as much.
Uh,
I think
Yeah,
depression is,
depression.
It's multifactorial for sure.
yeah, I think a
Yeah,
big,
it's definitely a product of our modern society in many ways, but not exclusively.
yeah. I think we have just shifted away from the normal behavior of humans, which is, go out, hunt, get your food, and find somewhere dry to sleep. And if all that's taken care of, you're doing good. But now we've shifted into a world where we don't have to worry about any of that stuff. And now we're stuck in our brains and we work in our brains and everything is inside of there and our minds don't know how to
How to process that,
deal
yeah.
with it. Yeah.
Yeah.
so that the
Yeah,
load is exponentially higher than it was before.
if you're out and your goal is just to survive for the week, right? That's that's going to not leave a whole lot of time to deal with existential problems, right? I
Yeah.
mean, yeah, it makes sense to me, but
So I mean, they find in third world countries that yeah, they might have nothing, but they're happier be- because they're just focused on the
they probably have
basics.
a greater sense of community too than we do.
Yeah.
Yeah, that too.
Yeah, they recognize they can't do things on their own.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. Well, this was a good conversation. We definitely covered a lot of stuff.
Yeah, we did. And it's been hour 15, so that's the longest one we've done yet.
Yeah. I still believe in ghosts.
Yeah, no, I'm open to the idea for sure.
When I see one, I'll record it
Okay.
with my camera.
Make sure it's a
So that we
super
have,
old,
yeah,
janky camera with night vision.
yeah, record it on that VHS that's already like 30 years old, so it's going to be really nicely ghosted out. There's your ghost.
All right, before we get off, okay, so Casey's brother passed away, right?
Mm.
Yeah.
Right after he passed away, I told you guys our vacuum started turning on by itself. It's an electric vacuum. So it either started shorting out right after he passed away, which it hasn't been doing it anymore. And then our TV would like freak out. And then, like it would turn on and off. I sound crazy saying this, but it was legitimately happening.
Okay, so I'm not saying it wasn't ghosts, but there's a phenomenon that most people are not aware of when it comes to electronics, and
Okay.
that's cosmic rays. If you get a high energy cosmic ray that lands in an integrated circuit on your TV, it's going to do weird things, maybe even turn it on.
Would it do the same thing for my electric vacuum?
Probably not. And if it's like a mechanical switch, I can't imagine how a cosmic ray would turn on electric vacuum if it's a mechanical switch. But
Yeah.
anything that has like the soft
And
power, always on, but not really, like computers and TVs and stuff, they can be flipped on with
or
cosmic
like
rays.
a child's toy, like one of those walkers that you push and it starts making noises.
Yeah, maybe.
Okay. Because all
I don't
three of
know.
those darn things were doing stuff for like 2 weeks and it was freaking me out. Did
Yeah,
not
well,
like it.
it's not likely to be cosmic ray over 3 weeks. I mean, something like that would make headlines. Oh, there's like cosmic rays coming from everywhere. But
So all of this was occurring for like 2 weeks.
yeah, so maybe not cosmic rays. But I was just offering one possible explanation for why electronics would randomly go haywire.
I was just curious because I wasn't liking it, and I'm not gonna lie. One day I was at the house by myself, and two of those things occurred. The vacuum turned on by itself, and one of the kids' toys went off, and I slept with the light on all night. I was tripping balls.
I don't blame you. That's creepy. Oh man.
I forgot to talk about that stuff, but I don't know. I too much weird crap, and a lot of it could probably be explained away, but it still freaks me out.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't take away the. In the moment, you're not going to be like, oh, it's just nothing, right? Like, yeah, I totally
Yeah,
get it.
and right now, like I'm a freaking grown man, and I was still freaked out. I was like, man, I wish I wasn't home by myself.
I get the feeling that too.
So, and it honestly, right after he passed away, it was like a couple days after all this stuff started happening. Ugh. Well, Steven, if you are there, be nice.
Do cool stuff, man. Like
Yeah, don't be
find
rude.
find my money that I lose.
It's like, oh, I found $20 on the coffee table. Uh, but Anywho's. Alrighty, we can wrap it up.
Okay.
That was a good conversation.
Yeah, that was good. Thank you guys
That's
for
fun.
talking for a minute.
Thanks for messaging me. I didn't notice until later though.
That's okay.
That's
We
right.
were like,
It's
Doug
fun.
will,
I
Doug will
like.
eventually respond. It's all good.
Yeah, we need to have 3 of us. I think 3's a good, solid number.
Yeah, I like it. I like it a lot because then we have a little bit more input and don't have as many.
And Doug's so freaking smart.
No, he's so smart.
I'm okay with being like the little peon. It's you two. So
I think your insights are great. I really do. Like, I don't know. If you spend time amongst a bunch of like, I don't want to say smart people, but like, engineers and stuff, it's just really boring. It's just not that great.
right.
I like spending time amongst,
Little.
I just
The lay
amongst people who have more,
Yeah.
who are more grounded in reality, is
Yeah.
what I want to say,
Yeah, I gotcha.
rather than in theory and stuff. Yeah, that's just me.
No, I
That makes
appreciate
sense.
that. I think it's good.
And
that's,
having multiple. Go ahead.
I think that's why we have a good group of friends because we have people in all manner of different things that have different opinions about. They have different experiences because our areas of expertise are so varied.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, we have computer science right here,
Mhm.
and we have the medical field.
Mhm.
We have economics,
Mhm.
and I kill bugs. So
That's
I'm a
right.
murderer.
Oh, I thought you were gonna say something else entirely, but that's good. I'm glad you kill bugs.
I'm not gonna lie, it's probably made me less sensitive. The first
Oh, I
time
believe it. Yeah.
the first time I murdered a raccoon, I felt pretty bad.
Yeah.
Now I don't really feel bad, so
This
I
co-
kind of got problems now. I'm probably gonna become a sociopath
you know,
because honestly, the last time I just walked up to the freaking raccoon and capped it in the face, and I didn't feel anything.
well, at least you're not
You know,
torturing it beforehand.
that's true.
Well,
But
yeah, I don't.
I hate to draw comparisons, but that's kind of what, the Nazis described. Like
And
afterwards, they're just like, oh yeah, it just became, normal.
well,
Yeah,
it's.
yeah.
I think that honestly, I think that's an important thing for us to recognize because
Yeah.
Jordan Peterson, he taps into this. We have to recognize that we're all capable of evil.
Right.
Hmm.
Well, that's
And
Jungian psychology, right, Doug?
Yes.
is it?
Yeah. Yeah, I love Jungian psychology. It's great.
Yeah. So it's not a far reach to say that if we are exposed to something long enough, that it become easy for us to do the same.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I think there's also value in um, treating animals. I mean, obviously we need to exterminate them when they're pests and stuff, but like in having respect for animals as living creatures,
Yeah.
just because we always need to maintain that sense,
Mm-hmm.
The
because it's
divide
really
between
easy.
us
It's
and
just really
other
easy to
animals.
just kind of blur, what I'm trying to say? It's
Well,
hard to
I mean,
explain.
so there is an interesting thing because there's a guy I learned about. It was in Idaho. He was a trapper,
Yeah.
and he poached a lot. Like he trapped improperly. He would use baits that were harmful to other animals. They would attract them, other animals that he wasn't looking for, and kill them unnecessarily. And
Was he using fly bait and coke?
something like that, yeah.
Okay,
Um,
it's a good one.
but he ended up killing 2 game park officer or fish and game officers, and he executed him in the same way that that he would an animal that he caught in his trap. Like he shot him in the chest, and then he went behind and he capped him in the back of the head.
Yeah.
Jeez, yeah,
And so he just
yeah, that's exactly what
lost
I
that
mean. Like,
humanity and just treated them as if they were an animal to be executed, to be killed and skinned
yeah,
and sold.
that's crazy. And like, I'm not saying we shouldn't use animal products or anything like that, or we shouldn't hunt. Just that we should have that sense of respect,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, I agree. And I usually gauge it off of if they're an a-hole or not. Believe it or not, raccoons have personalities.
Oh, I believe it 100%. Yeah.
And if they're super chill when I'm trying, because usually I can lose my license if I let them go in the state of Ohio.
Really?
Yeah.
Either the law is you release them where you caught them, or you euthanize them. And the reason
That's
is they
interesting.
carry diseases, and if you release them somewhere else, they could infect another population.
That makes sense.
So I don't always do that. Uh, usually like 50 to 60% of the time I'll let them go, but I base it off their personality. So if they try to bite my fingers off when I pick up the cage, they're dead. And if they're super chill when I'm transporting them, I'll usually let them go.
This kind of artificial selection, after a few generations of Spencer wander around in Ohio, killing the worst of the raccoons, all the raccoons are going to be pretty chill.
They'll be just docile. They'll be like, "Yeah, man, we just want weed and peace."
Oh, that's funny.
No, but it is interesting, and I honestly had this internal dialogue that we're having right now because I reflected on myself. I was like, man, I don't feel how I did at the beginning. Like, there's a piece of me that, yeah, it's just animals. It's easy to discount,
Right.
but a piece of me just felt numb,
Mm-hmm.
and it's a hard thing to recognize. Like, a piece of you is less than it was before, and it comes with anything like religious means. Like, I got behind on my tithing, and it's just easy not to do it anymore. And all of a sudden, like, a piece of me just felt numb. And so now, like, I'm freaking selling one of my cars because I'm like, I got to get back on my tithing, and I want that piece back
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
because I feel like I just lose pieces of me, and it's just easy to dive into it and just ignore it. But it does change who you are,
Yeah.
and you just got to be selective of what parts of you erode or what parts of you change for the better or the worse.
Right.
For the better or worse.
Well, and that is an interesting point to bring up as well, because maybe not with ghosts, but with sociopathy and um,
Mm-hmm.
things like that. I do think that part of that is because I think a lot of people become psychotic because they aren't living. They're living a life that they know is incorrect, and their mind keeps telling them this is wrong, 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 and living in that state of dissonance um, eventually causes their mind to break in a way where they can either choose, or they have instances where they completely shut themselves off from what they know to be right and allow themselves to do the terrible things, and then they can live a separate life where they're, doing the right thing. They're not doing anything that's super wrong, right?
Yeah.
Um, and that's actually a phenomenon called compartmentalization.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And sometimes that can be useful because you do have to kind of compartmentalize your life a little bit, but in a way where you're
Yeah.
compartmentalizing your morality is when it becomes an issue. And so
That makes sense.
I think that we humans are capable of doing awful things because they allow themselves to believe that what they're doing either isn't that bad, or they're able to distance themselves enough from, through compartmentalization. Like in this instance, I'm being this person, and so therefore my morality doesn't
Well, I
count
mean,
towards what I'm doing.
we see that in nature. I mean, chimpanzees will murder other chimpanzees, but then they'll have normal interactions with their family members of their tribe or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not foreign, but it is a scary thing. And when you dive into yourself, maybe you guys haven't experienced this, but I have felt inside myself that I am capable of bad things. And it's a hard realization to come to the point where you're like, okay, I'm not the innocent person that I was when I was a young adult, where I thought the world was peachy clean and everyone had good intentions and X, Y, and Z. And all of a sudden I find myself mired in the pit of filth and feeling inside myself that, okay, if X, Y, and Z occur, I know I'd be capable of this. And it's not necessarily a good thing. Like, I know I could kill someone to protect my family. I know I could kill someone to protect the values that I hold dear. And that's a hard thing to recognize
Mm-hmm.
and not hold the remorse that I think I should. And
Hmm.
maybe it'd be different if it actually occurred. It's easy to project ourselves and not have a full grasp of the reality of what it actually would be.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But just having that thought, like, yeah, I could do this. Like, yeah, if that this scenario occurred, this is what I would do. And it's not necessarily a good thing. You wish you were someone else. You wish you were that young person that it's like, no, I wouldn't do that.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's just recognizing what situations would cause you to do those bad things, and then if or when those situations pop up, you can say, okay, this looks similar to the situation that I played out in my mind, where I could become the, what does it call them, the shadow, right? That's what they
Yeah.
Hmm.
um, and
You
then
integrate your shadow. Yeah.
yeah, and facing that and saying I will not do this because I've made this decision that I will be better than that.
And the hard thing is, like, in your mind, at least in my mind, it's like a moral gray ground. Like, there's not necessarily a super right answer,
No,
if that makes sense.
no, there's not.
So it's like if someone came into my home and
Yeah.
threatened my family,
And you'd want
I
it to be a balance, and ideally, like
yeah,
you're not gonna let your family be harmed by someone breaking in. But what if you overreacted and it was somebody who just stumbled in your house thinking it was the wrong place, right?
right.
Like
Yeah.
there's so many variables, right? Like
Yeah.
knowing exactly what to do at the time is just so it's hard to know.
Mm.
Like
But I think
yeah.
that we can default towards certain actions rather than others, because
Yeah.
I think where when we don't have an idea of what we would do in certain situations is we would when we falter and we make the wrong choice.
Yeah. I agree. I think it's useful to go over these scenarios and
And
kind of make a decision.
Or at
Yeah.
least like going over similar situations so you can be like, okay, so I think I need to default towards this action in this type of situation. Like if you're in a heated argument, you should default towards maybe taking a step back, thinking about it
Yeah,
for a minute,
that's true.
yeah.
and then going back to address the issue after having thought about it.
Yeah, because if you kind of plant it in your brain what to do beforehand, it's a lot easier to do that than in the moment when you're in that heated argument or whatever it is. Yeah, you're it's not necessarily you're not necessarily going to be in the mindset of making the best decision.
Yeah.
So having that ahead of time is a good idea.
Yeah, and I think where I struggle is like I don't necessarily have an issue with the change of my default because that's what's occurred. But the change of my default is not how I was raised, and that's where the conflict comes in.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a shift from what I was before to what I am now, and recognizing that one side was like an altruistic point of view, and now I'm diving into more of in my mind, a realistic scenario, like if that makes
Yeah.
sense.
Well, and
Uh,
I think that our even our perspective or our idea of what or a realistic scenario would entail only we really only know that when we experience those things.
yeah,
And
it's true.
sometimes there are scenarios that we just cannot experience, or there's a lot where I hope we don't ever experience. Like I hope I don't ever have the experience of Well, I was told to
having to
execute
deal
this
with a home
person.
intruder. Or yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and those are extremes. But for example, when you go on a mission, I don't know about your guys' experience, but when I went on the mission, like my perspective of what bad was watching a movie on Sunday. You know, oh my
Ugh.
goodness, like, oh, that's so naughty.
Terrible, Spence.
And then I go on a mission, I'm like, oh, you guys aren't living together and sleeping with each other? Like, sweet, like this is gonna be easy. Like, you only
Like your
drink, like,
bar changed. Yeah.
yeah, I'm like, you only drink. That's sweet. Or you guys are planning on getting married? Like, awesome, man, home run, you know.
I know.
Yeah.
I had a hard time with my
So
sick president because he watched Babe on Sunday one time when I was over at his house.
see, so your things just change, and all of a sudden you're now in reality. You're like, oh, watching something on Sunday was such a minor
Mm-hmm.
thing to focus on, but and then you're forced into reality, which is like, yeah, that's not as big as 100,000 other things.
Right.
But anyways,
My wife's giving me a look, guys.
it's
I
just
gotta
hard
go.
growing up. All right,
But
All right.
life is good. Be happy.
it
Let's
is
do
good.
this again next week then.
Yeah, we should.
What do you want to talk about, Doug?
Oh, geez.
We'll let you pick.
We can
I'll have
talk
to give
about
it
a
some thought.
philosophical thing or a self-improvement thing or a supernatural thing. Any of those things should be great.
Oh yeah, that'd be great. I'll give it some thought.
Okay.
All right, sounds good.
All right.
All right, guys, good chatting.
Okay. Talk to you soon.
All right, bye.